This is WWE superstar Drew McIntyre, and you're listening to the WWE Podcast.
The champ is
the one that everybody wants, me.
It's going to WrestleMania. Claymore!
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. This is my iron. You're going to acknowledge me.
Hey everybody, welcome to the WWE Podcast for the week in review of Sundays, February 26, 2023. Thank you for joining me. I have Anthony DeMarco with me. He'll be joining me shortly to cover the week in review. First, let me give a shout out to our latest patron of the show, and that's Brooke S. Thank you so much for joining us, Brooke. Hope you enjoy your ad-free experience. And if you'd like to join Brooke, you can do so at patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Get a shout out on the show, get some video, much more. This is not going to be a comprehensive week in review. Anthony and I only had about an hour to chat, and so I will be doing a much more thorough week in review for things that we didn't talk about. That'll be posted on Patreon and maybe the larger feed in the coming hours, probably sometime tomorrow, Monday. That'll be posted, almost a part 2. Maybe it'll just be like week in review continued or something, and that'll be coming to your way. So if you're thinking, oh my God, there's so much you didn't talk about, that's because Anthony and I get on tangents and we just start going down rabbit holes and talk about a lot of the big picture stuff and don't get into the nitty gritty. That's just the way we kind of converse. And I'm not making apologies for it. I'm just letting you know we only had a certain amount of time to talk, and don't worry, tomorrow or Monday or whenever you're listening to this, I will be doing a more comprehensive week in review, and we will not be doing a current state. That this is kind of in place of that for Mondays. So, all right, well, thank you everybody again, and please consider supporting the show by going to Patreon or Apple Podcasts. Has a 1-week free trial. If you want to get ad-free everything on Apple Podcasts, you can do that, or give us a 5-star rating. Best way to do it on Apple Podcasts. So thank you, everybody. Here come Anthony DeMarco and myself discussing the big ticket items for this week in WWE. Hope you enjoy, and I'll be talking to you very soon. Okay, welcome to the week in review. We've got 5 weeks until WrestleMania. It's going to creep up on us faster than we think, and in a bit of a different feel for the week in review show, I've got Anthony DeMarco with me tonight to discuss everything going on, or at least the big topics going on in WWE this week. And this is also going to be kind of a quasi substitute for tomorrow night. Tomorrow night will be I'll be digging through the archives and posting something appropriate for the time we're in of WrestleMania season. So look forward to that. But Anthony, 5 weeks. Are you ready?
Yeah, it's crazy how fast it's coming up. And do you remember, on a side note, do you remember when WrestleMania used to be mid-March?
Yes. Yes.
It kind of completely swung. I know that it's not the major difference. We're talking about 2-3 weeks here, but do you find it any different at all that going from mid-March to beginning of April like it has been for the last several years?
Do I feel like it's any different? I mean, yeah, I've kind of just gotten. I mean, we adjust so quickly as wrestling fans. I'm good with it. I mean, there's always that big gap between Chamber and Mania, and this year is no exception. There's about 6 weeks or so, and I'm cool with it. Plus the 2-night thing. The 2 nights I've gotten to adapt to pretty quickly as well. I don't know how you feel about the 2-night format. I really enjoy it versus a 7 to 8 hour marathon.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the 1 night thing because then it kind of feels like a Super Bowl type thing, like that kind of like the 1 night stand type of, big time moment. But based on how long WrestleManias have gotten, and you were there in Orlando in 2017 for WrestleMania 33, and I remember the last WrestleMania with the 1 night format. I believe it was WrestleMania 35 in New York. And all I remember is, by the time the main event of Becky Lynch, Ronda, and Charlotte got on, it was, 1:45, and, everyone was just exhausted. Michael Cole had lost his voice. I remember myself, I was, barely able to keep my eyes open. And I just think for all involved, if you want to go this big at a WrestleMania, you might as well make it 2 nights. But on the other hand, I also wouldn't be necessarily opposed to just keeping the cards smaller and 1 night. I guess that's kind of like a question I would toss back to you is like, do you think that they've overinflated WrestleMania?
Oh, I mean, I've made this argument forever. I mean, that's not even a debate, at least in my mind. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when they try to build this as the Super Bowl of wrestling, and then everyone is included that has ever participated ever on the card, or at least in the last like few months in wrestling, I don't think everyone should get a trophy for being there. I know that the talent love it. I know they feel like they want to be a part of the show. But if you're going to tell me it's the most important show of the year and it's a Super Bowl of wrestling, well, by definition, the Super Bowl would mean the best of the best are there. Not everyone gets a jersey because you're part of the team. And they try to fit everyone on everything in a battle royal or whatever. And you're like, I don't like it. I think that it should be cut down. Like, if I were to be presented with the option of the current format, 2 nights, 3.5 hours each, or 1 night, 3.5, maybe 4 hours, I could deal with 4 at the most. I would be all for the 1 night, best of the best. Don't do any filler stuff and just give us the absolute best you have to offer. Plus, it also motivates staff behind the scenes to, step up their game and be the best that they can be to be on the card and make the card. And when you look back, I mean, you had, I think WrestleMania 14 with Austin versus Shawn Michaels was like 3 hours and change. Like, it was just a Monday Night Raw. So.
Yeah, and I think it's a certain less is more type of scenario. And you've been to 2 WrestleManias, right? You saw the one in Orlando, and you saw one of my favorites, WrestleMania 20. And obviously 2 very different eras of WWE, and certainly Orlando, we are already into like the bigger, the better, the more inflated. But I mean, I remember WrestleMania 20 was a packed card, but I don't think it went more than 4 hours. Like, how would you compare your 2 live experiences between the 2?
I mean, yeah, WrestleMania 20 in Madison Square Garden, as far as time goes, I remember by the end of it, I was pretty tired, but it was an awesome main event. If you guys remember, and we've covered it many times on this show, you've done an entire episode about it, with the triple threat match with Chris Benoit, Shawn Michaels, and Triple H for the world title. Amazing matchup. That kept you going. And really, that's kind of, I think, the sweet spot is about 3.5 to 4 hours max, where you get people's best. Anytime you go beyond that, the crowd reaction is going to be muted because people are just ready to go home, especially if you've got kids with you. My God. I mean, I can't imagine that. And families do go to these things. So it was a smart thing to do. But when you're talking about 20, it was palatable. When you look at WrestleMania 33, I remember, like, by the time not Brock Lesnar, it was Undertaker, Roman Reigns was happening. I mean, I was so just dead tired. I mean, and I came in there and I had got a good night's sleep and all that, and I still was just like, and you see people around you kind of fading, and they still, you get ramped up with the crowd, but it's difficult, man. After that 4 hour mark, to me, that's just the off the cliff moment.
Yeah, and like, look, I just went to a pay-per-view for the first time in my life, and I think that pay-per-view went, I believe it was less than, like, about 3 hours on the nose, because it got started at 8, and I believe I was walking out of the Bell Center, maybe after all the after-match shenanigans, it went maybe 3 hours and 20 minutes or so. But I remember like being like home like an hour later. And, I think that's been a theme under Triple H, like less matches and less is more type of approach. And obviously I know WrestleMania is kind of bigger than that, with all the sponsors and all the money that they're going to pump out for all this advertising and whatnot. So they're going to make it the 2-night format. Obviously, in terms of revenue, they're going to make it more. So maybe there's an exception for WrestleMania. But I think that what we've seen under Triple H, and I noticed this for the first time at Extreme Rules, which under, let's say, a year ago under Vince McMahon, that would be a pay-per-view that I would just throw away, and I would probably watch on record and fast forward through half of it. But I feel like Triple H, that for all, let's say, that I've criticized him specifically with the Elimination Chamber booking, his pay-per-views have been more of the less is more type of ilk. And I feel like even B-level pay-per-views like Elimination Chamber, like Extreme Rules, have been more watchable because of it.
How many pay-per-views have we come out of in the last 4, 5, 6 months with Triple H at the top of creative? And we've said, man, that overperformed, that over-delivered, that was a better pay-per-view than I thought. I would say almost all of them. Not everyone was a hit. Not every match was a hit. It's impossible. But I generally feel over the last 6 months or so that I have come away after the pay-per-view is over and gone, man, like that was a good event because of the wrestling, whether it's the story within a story in the ring or the actual wrestling itself. And even if the story sucked, the wrestlers made up for it in the ring. Whatever the case may be, it all seems to gel much better under Triple H. He seems to be really good at putting these pay-per-views together, and then the talent just deliver. I mean, it seems as if, amazingly, you give the talent enough time to tell the story in the ring, and wow, look at that. They're able to tell the story in the ring because they're professionals. So I think that's also another advantage or another positive if you're a talent. It seems to be Triple H giving you enough time to actually tell a damn story in the ring.
And it's so crazy, like, as you know, for my WWE Retro this week that came out a day later, so I apologize for everyone, just a crazy schedule for me. But I remember going through that match card, and I've watched that pay-per-view several times. That was the first ever WrestleMania I watched live. I think I was 6 years old. And what's crazy to say is that there was no one-on-one singles match at that entire pay-per-view. They were all multi-man, battle royals, 6-man tag, triangle ladder match, fatal 4-way. There was one one-on-one match, and it was a cat fight, so I don't even count it. So, like, how crazy is it? And this is, like, I always find WrestleMania 2000/16 was such a unique WrestleMania, and one that was never done before or never done after. And it was a condensed card, too. And, it did kind of go by fast when kind of reviewing it. Is there anything looking back on that particular WrestleMania that you find overly unique, and for the better or for the worse?
The McMahon in every corner. I mean, the main event. Obviously that was the pay-per-view. It's weird when you say WrestleMania 16. It feels weird to say because no one says WrestleMania 16. And so when I hear that, I'm like, wait, what? Oh, WrestleMania 2000. And that to me was unique in that looking back now, 23 years later, it was such a McMahon thing to do. And at the time I was kind of like, oh, it's just, the McMahons getting involved because they're all in a feud with one another. None of them get along. So they're all going to be in a corner of their superstar of their choice. And then, looking back, I'm like, that is such a kind of an egotistical thing to do, to take the focus off of the talent at the main event of WrestleMania. And not only is it not one-on-one, it's a fatal 4-way elimination. I think it was Big Show, Cactus Jack, Rock, and Triple H. And, you have a McMahon really overshadowing what should have been going on in the ring and the focus of the ring. I remember Stephanie getting a rock bottom in that matchup. That was fun to watch. Of course, that would never happen today. But and then you have Triple H, or I think Big Show won, right? Didn't he? Triple H won. Big Show won the championship at another event.
At Survivor Series.
Yeah, because Austin was run over by a vehicle. So, yeah, Triple H ends up retaining or winning. So I think, yeah, that to me was most unique, that it was a fatal 4-way elimination, and the McMahons kind of put themselves at the center of everything in that main event.
Yeah, well, when I was covering it, I kept saying, like, it just felt like overcompensation for Steve Austin not being there, and The Undertaker as well. And I believe that was the only WrestleMania that The Undertaker missed during his, like, long stretch being at WrestleManias. And it did feel like a WrestleMania that really lacked star power. It does feel like kind of like the forgotten TLC match between the Hardys, Dudleys, and Edge and Christian, because for some reason they called it a triangle ladder match. And then we're all supposed to feel like it wasn't a TLC match, like it's the same damn thing. So, like, it always feels like that's the one that nobody talks about. Obviously, you think about WrestleMania 17 and SummerSlam 2000 as the two primary ones. But yeah, it was it wasn't a bad pay-per-view by any means. A lot of tag team matches, like 3 just grudge tag team matches, which I found very bizarre. There may have even been 4, to be honest, like that hardcore time limit battle royal. It was a very strange, oddly booked card, but they did have a really cool triple threat match, a 2-fall triple threat match for the Intercontinental and European titles. So it was a good pay-per-view, just kind of unique, and I guess that's kind of like how you tied it in nowadays, that you had like a super concise pay-per-view 23 years ago, and now we have 2 4-hour long nights that covers an entire weekend.
Well, guys, I think that was an awesome promo to go and listen to his episode that we released yesterday for WrestleMania 2000. I think I did listen to. I got about halfway through, so I really recommend you guys go and take a listen. If you haven't seen the event, if you have before but you want to relive it, it's a great way to do that and take a look at a WrestleMania that was very unique in name, in feel, lack of star power. You just had overcompensation in the main event that. I don't think it needed to be that complicated, but I see what they were doing with no Austin. The biggest star in pro wrestling wasn't available because of his neck surgery. Although oddly, he was at the next event coming in, but not wrestling. Not to get totally off topic, guys. I promise we're getting to the week in review. This is the last thing I'll say on the retro part of things. I remember Austin coming back at Backlash, having Linda McMahon announced him coming back. The crowd loses their mind over just the mere mention of him. He comes out and levels everyone with a chair, but looking very slow. Like, I don't think he could have actually wrestled the match. He didn't even drop a stunner when he came back. I don't think because he could. Otherwise, he would have. I mean, the only thing he could do safely is swing a chair in the Backlash when it was just, known as Backlash at the time. I was old enough to remember that. And having him come in the main event, level all the McMahons, level Triple H, with a steel chair, and so that's my memory. Missing the pay-per-view series by one event, not even able to physically be at WrestleMania at that time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember Triple H when he was on Logan Paul's podcast, Impulsive, he mentioned that, like, they just thought, like, in retrospect, I think all parties would have preferred if he just had the one-on-one match with The Rock. Like, that's what it should have been, right? Rock versus Triple H for the WWF Championship. And I believe the pay-per-view you're referring to when Austin returned, that was their Iron Man match, or the 60-minute long Iron Man match that The Rock ended up winning, I believe. And he said that was the match that should have probably been at WrestleMania. And it always just kind of felt bizarre. Like, you have Big Show in there probably because of his size, and they were booking him very strongly at that point. You have Mick Foley kind of like with a Last Dance feel. But, like, you have Rock, you have Austin. No, they're not exactly Stone Cold Steve Austin level, but they're right there. And they're main eventers in their own right. So it just kind of felt like overbooking for no reason when you did have a legit one-on-one main event between two of the biggest stars at your disposal.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, man, I could go down a rabbit hole with this.
Same here.
Damn. Okay, guys, let's shift gears to the current product, as we are now 5 weeks away, as I said at the beginning of the show, from WrestleMania 39. Crazy to think WrestleMania 40 is next year, but here we are. And as we look at the product, again, we'll hit on some big-ticket items. I'll fill in the blanks with a separate episode exclusively for those on Patreon. That said, I want to talk about, as always, quickly, though, I don't want to make an entire episode as we always do, the Sami Zayn progression of the story, right? I mean, we've already gone through Montreal, but now we've shifted into this, as expected, kind of Kevin Owens and Sami alliance that isn't an alliance yet because Kevin is playing coy and they're going to just tell the story until eventually they unite and give each other a hug or whatever, which is going to happen. It seems kind of the way they're going to do it, the way they did with Triple H and Michaels in 06, reuniting DX. They were hesitant at first, all that. I think that's the way they're going to do it, and that's fine. It's a good story. It's a fun story. Is it the story you and I want? No. But in any other scenario, any other year, if Sami didn't have the year he had, we'd say, wow, this is amazing. It seems they are going to main event with the Usos on night one, all that. So it's hard to call this a failure, but how do you feel about, and especially on SmackDown too, with Jimmy and Jay, and Jimmy beating down Sami, but Jay standing in the crowd just staring, and then eventually Sami getting the haluva kick, and Jay just continues to look on, so we still don't know where his loyalties lie.
Well, at least it's not as... One thing I really like is that they explained the reason as to why KO didn't make the save for Sami during the match, where he probably still has a lot of beef with Sami, and he isn't exactly thinking of him as a friend, so at least you can justify that, like, okay, it wasn't like he got stuck in traffic or was caught up in catering. It was because he still does have a lot of animosity towards Sami, and not all is forgiven. And that is a very realistic thing. Like, it's not like Sami was, exactly cool with this guy. He kicked him in the pills in the War Games match, and then he let a beatdown go on until like the 11th hour at the Royal Rumble. So the other part about this, in my opinion, that I really like is that at least they're adding layers. Like, they're not just shifting gears right away with no realism behind it. They're showing cracks in the foundation between Sami and Kevin. They're showing cracks in the foundation between the Usos. And at least there's an intriguing story to tell, either than, well, this was the easiest low-hanging fruit to grab, so we're going to go with it. Like we said, like you just said, and as we've expressed over the last number of weeks / months, we don't exactly like the ultimate destination where it feels like this is headed, but at least they're doing really good storytelling and giving us a reason to give it a chance to be invested, as opposed to just doing the absolute basic and easy road.
Yeah, that's true. You know, the explanation of having Kevin Owens come out there, and reasonably so, I think it makes sense that he would be hesitant to come and help Sami. I think the argument against that, though, as I'm trying to still justify Kevin not coming out, if you really hate the bloodline, if you really want to take them down and you want to do it in a way that is the most severe, the most punishing, well, wouldn't taking the belt from Roman be that punishment, instead of looking at it, well, I don't want to help Sami, but if your goal is to beat down the bloodline, maximizing what you do, maximizing the punishment for them would be taking the belt off Roman, even if a byproduct is giving the title to a guy that you don't exactly love. It's at least taking it from someone you hate and giving it to someone you maybe don't like. So there is that, but I appreciate them at least trying to fill that gap of, all right, why the hell didn't he come out in the main event instead of waiting till after? But now, as we fast forward into this week, I think you're right. There are layers. Jey Uso seems to be now part 2 of this. We now know Sami's not champion. He's not going to be in the main event of WrestleMania. So now where do Jey Uso's loyalties lie? Do they lie with Jimmy? Do they lie with Sami? Is it somewhere in between? Is it going to waffle back and forth? I mean, ultimately, it has to be with Jimmy, even if it's reluctantly, because how else are we going to get a match at WrestleMania? There's no other combination of these 4 with Kevin, Sami, Jimmy, and Jey that you could have any kind of match other than a tag team title match. So it's kind of a foregone conclusion that Jey is going to eventually side with Jimmy reluctantly, or if it's just a complete work from the beginning. Can you see any other possible scenario that they're leading to? Is there something I'm missing besides the completely predictable, but I understand why, Jey and Jimmy versus KO and Sami? Am I missing something?
I don't think you are, because the only way that you'd be missing something is if Roman was still involved, and it feels like he's already way by the whole Sami stuff, and he's on a collision course with Cody Rhodes. And look, I appreciate what Triple H is trying to do. I certainly prefer this, other than, just the KO comes out and embraces Sami and forgets about everything and there's no logic behind it. I like that he's taking the time to at least invest into having us believe into some of the realism, and it does make sense about how KO would still have animosity and reservation before rekindling everything with Sami Zayn. But to your point, it does feel like an obvious and predictable destination of a tag team match at WrestleMania for the Undisputed Tag Team Championships. And look, as always, you've said it before, I've said it, that predictability isn't always a bad thing if it's the right thing to do. And in this case, it probably is the best thing to do for everyone involved if it was a regular circumstance. Unfortunately, based on what we just went through with Sami Zayn and the roller coaster of the last, 4, 5, 6 months of him in the bloodline, arguably the best television we've seen from WWE in well over a decade, it just feels like the payoff is something that's going to be a letdown. And I think that's what we've said from the beginning here, is as soon as they decide to pass on the opportunity to pull the trigger in Montreal at the Elimination Chamber, nothing that they will do with Sami Zayn from here on out, even him joining the main event and winning the titles at WrestleMania, will feel like a letdown. And maybe that's unfair, because I think it'll be a really good match. It's going to be really cool to see the tag team championships be put in such a prestigious spot with such a prestigious storyline. I've heard rumors that maybe it's going to main event night 1, so that's all good. And I love how they're, emphasizing the importance of these tag team titles along with this storyline. But it's just an unfortunate circumstance that any other year, I think we would be all for this angle. but because of what preceded it with Sami Zayn and Roman Reigns and the major letdown at Elimination Chamber, it was doomed to be a letdown from the beginning.
Yep. There's nothing, yeah. I'm not trying to rehash everything. Just to sum it up, you're right. There's nothing they can do that will ever top the moment they had. It's past, it's gone, and now we just have to look forward and, okay, what's the second best thing they can do, because we can't go back now. And this is, to me, the second best thing they can do, I think, is, in a real friendship with Kevin Owens, they have a ton of history, a ton of chemistry. All four of these men, once that match is announced and is official, you could imagine that may be a candidate for match of the night. So we can look forward to that. I think they could put on an amazing matchup. And sure, it'll be fun to take down the Bloodline, take the championships from them. How does Roman react when the Usos lose the belts? That'll be fun to think about. And having Kevin and Sami reunite in a very emotional moment, I think is going to be a cool thing to do. I mean, I have to, and we all have to, lower our standards now. We shouldn't have to think that way with WrestleMania, given the guy that's the hottest thing in the business right now, which is weird to say that we have to lower our standards, but we do, because this is the reality. And I think that, though, this is still a nice second option. This is a nice way, the best way, if you're not going to put him in the main event, then stick him in this tag team match that we saw coming and have a great match with a great storyline and tell a great story and take the belts off the Usos. And as we shift our focus to Roman, though, with Cody Rhodes this past week on Raw, I don't know how you felt, though, about this with Paul Heyman. I was very down on this, and I don't remember the last time I said I was down on a Paul Heyman segment. So before everyone attacks me for being negative about this whole storyline, it was one of those fluke, to me, really just a bad, poorly executed or poorly thought up a segment with Cody and Paul on the Tron. Hilarious in the neck brace and him not shaving, which was a nice touch to make it more real. But talking about like Cody's wife and how Roman's going to keep her warm, or I'm going to keep her warm, and the crowd was booing because I think they couldn't hear and they were tired of him droning on. Cody was suddenly at a loss of words. For whatever reason, he didn't have much to say on this. It was a weird, just bad segment. How did you feel about this segment with Paul Heyman and Cody Rhodes? I thought actually it detracted from the fan support of Cody in this storyline in a small way.
Well, I remember I sent you an article, I think it was NoDQ.com, I hope I remember that properly, that they're starting to be concerned about the Sami chants. And I actually read something, I believe it was Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer, that's who he writes for, I believe. Yep. And I think he wrote that, or he reported that the reason they had Paul Heyman interrupt Cody so quickly was not to allow the fans to start chanting Sami. And not to kind of tie everything back into Sami, but it feels, assuming this is true, and, you could argue that no one's more plugged in than Dave Meltzer in the wrestling world, although there's Sean Ross Sapp and others. But assuming this is true, it kind of feels effed up that now they're manipulating television segments for the main event of WrestleMania, the build for the main event WrestleMania, so the fans have certain reactions or won't have a reaction. And it just feels like, well, for one, it's kind of disappointing because Triple H lived this firsthand with Daniel Bryan and saw how fans could just single-handedly overtake and hijack something. And I don't get it, why it's had to get to this point. Like, I don't know why, like, Cody versus Roman is like this can't miss main event for these guys. Like, did I miss something? Are these guys Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock from 22 years ago? Like, I don't really understand why they've had to go to this length. And I would have thought that someone like Triple H would have understood that, hey, like, sometimes plans change and sometimes they're for the better, i.e. Daniel Bryan in 2014. And look, I get it that Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes are much different from Randy Orton and Batista, so I get that. Obviously, Cody and Roman have a lot more tread on their tires than Batista and Randy did back then. But I don't know. It kind of came through in the segment. Like you said, the Paul Heyman stuff was weird. Like, I can keep your wife warm. Like, dude, no offense, but have you looked in the mirror? Like, I mean, it just was unrealistic. It was stupid. It was awkward. Even Cody's reaction, like, really, that promo rattled you? Like, you got under your skin. And then he says the thing about, like, I'm going to tell you the same thing. And it's just like, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I went into this program and this rivalry with a preconceived negative tone to it because I knew it was coming and I'm not a fan of Cody Rhodes and all that. But I wasn't really a fan of this in any which way. And the fact that there's reports that they're manipulating the way they want fans to react is kind of leaving a bad taste in my mouth.
I didn't hear about the manipulation. Now, I'm going to go on with that on face value. If it turns out that's not true, of course, my thoughts on this will change. But and I'm going to go and assuming that those reports are true, that they're screwing with the audio or they're screwing with the segments just to try to mitigate the fans chanting for Sammy, it's just, to me, that just spells same old, same old. It feels like Vince is secretly in charge when this kind of stuff happens, because Vince McMahon did this famously for years, especially around WrestleMania time with Roman Reigns. I mean, how many times did we hear fake? I mean, it's very obvious, just manipulated, manufactured cheers for Roman when SmackDown wasn't live. We saw, I can't tell you how many times I've heard it, and it's just so obvious it's not a real crowd at that moment. And the boos were a lot of times mixed down. The announcers were told to speak over the boos or just chalk it up to passion. Oh, we got a passionate audience here, or we're in Bizarre World, or it's a non-traditional audience. All these ridiculous, manipulative, really, ways that they would try to overcompensate for Roman getting booed out of the building. We would have that happen with Vince. Now, do I think Vince is in charge? That's another conversation to be had, but it just feels like it's kind of same old here if Triple H is doing that. I don't like that. That's I know what they're trying to do because they've decided this is what we're doing. We're going forward. We got to make it look as good as we can. So in one respect, I get that. But you're going against everything that you said you stand for in the fans telling us how they truly feel. And you have a focus group every night and all this garbage that they feed us. And then they're trying to manipulate how we feel and what we do. That said, moving on to the actual the problem at hand here with Cody. I think that when you look and hear the side-by-side reactions for Cody and Sammy, when you put them side-by-side in the States, get them out of Montreal, get them out of Canada, because that is an overinflated reaction, no doubt about it. But when you hear him, even in Evansville, Indiana this past week on SmackDown, I think he got an amazing reaction. Was it Montreal? No, it wasn't. But I didn't expect it to be. Now, when you listen to Cody, and I'm going to be listening very closely the next several weeks, I haven't heard the same love or feel the same love from fans that they have for Sammy right now, and I don't know how they're not looking at this and saying, hey, we need to call an audible. I understand that this is what we wanted. It's what we designed in our minds. This is what we told Cody, but look, the fans are forcing our hands. We tell them that they hold the keys to who gets promoted, or not promoted, but who gets what level on the card, who's in the main event, who do they want as their title holder, and the fans have made it very clear that it's Sammy. I don't know how the fans, as we move forward in time, are going to take Cody Roman one-on-one, and we get to Mania, and you're in that rabid building with the hardcore audience, and especially Monday Night Raw after. How do the fans react? I'm very interested to hear if it starts to decline week by week now.
And it's like I've said in the past, it's not even so much fair to Cody. I think that, even though I'm not a huge fan of his character, I think the guy obviously has a lot of talent. I think that he can be a world champion. I think it's too much, too fast, too soon. But hey, whatever. He is a talented guy. But I don't think it's fair for him that you're really shoehorning him into the main event when he's trying to succeed one of the hottest stories and hottest baby faces in recent memory. And I feel like, are you going to risk having a long-term legit main event babyface just because you want it so fast and you don't want to be patient and you don't want to give the fans what they want? And look, I'll admit that from a long-term perspective, Cody, and if I'm being completely objective here, Cody Rhodes is a much better option as a main event level babyface. Long-term, I get that. But I don't think that there would have been any harm in just giving Sammy his day for a month and a half. Like I said, and I get it, the 1,000 days, all this. I understand it from the Roman Reigns perspective. But it's like we said, there's been so much just collateral damage by trying to get to Roman Reigns. And now there's been collateral damage by trying to force feed Cody Rhodes into the main event. And for me, it's just, I don't like feeling this way about a WrestleMania. I hate it. And it's the second year in a row that I have absolutely zero care for the main event. And I hate saying that, but it's the biggest pay-per-view of the year. And it's the biggest match on the biggest pay-per-view of the year for the biggest title available, in this case for both titles. And I do not understand why it's like this again this year. Like last year it was different because it was just Vince trying to create the biggest match of all time because it was the first WrestleMania back in front of everyone in a packed capacity. I know they did it in front of a limited capacity at WrestleMania 38 or 37 rather, in Florida. But so I was just like, okay, whatever. But I hated it for the predictability because we all knew Roman was going to walk out of Mania as the double champion. This time around, it's more so the build. Like, I'm sure once we get to that main event, there's going to be unpredictability. The in-ring is going to be a lot more, I guess, extensive, if you will, than Brock and Roman. Roman and Cody, I'm sure, will put on a great in-ring match. But like we've said always, it's the story and it's the hype and it's the anticipation for that match that really sells it more than the in-ring product. And unfortunately, this is so far down the list out of things I watch in their weekly content. I really just don't care about Cody Rhodes or the main event scene right now. And that's absolutely unfortunate given it's going into WrestleMania.
Yeah, I don't like feeling like this. It's just, I mean, how many more times are we going to get into WrestleMania and feel this way with Roman Reigns in the main event? I understand why he's a big star. He is the biggest star. I've got nothing but respect. And turning him heel was an even bigger success than you and I and everyone could have imagined, given everything that's gone on. It's been a massive success, but sure, tons of collateral damage along the way. Totally not worth it. I don't care what the payoff is. You've said that a million times. I've said it too. There's nothing they could do that we would all go, oh, this was all worth it. You know, all the crap that they didn't do and could have done, and all the moments they could have crowned, you know, like Sammy and all that, or even Drew at Clash at the Castle. It's all not worth it. I don't care what they do, what documentary they put together, whatever. It's just not Rock. Rock beating Roman, not worth it. Even Austin versus Roman, which isn't going to happen, but not worth it to me. Like, that's how much I think they've gone down the rabbit hole here, and they're just continuing to do so. But one good thing about it, and I'll wrap it up on this because I want to talk about other stuff, is the tag titles being a main event of the WrestleMania. If that's true, I think that if my mind is correct here, that may be the first time that the tag titles have ever main evented a WrestleMania. I know it's 2 nights, so there's technically 2 main events, but so that's a good thing that the tag team titles are main eventing WrestleMania, which is just crazy and awesome, I think. But you know, with Roman Reigns and Cody, man, I think there could be in that main event. I would imagine there's going to be some Roman chants. As much as he's hated right now because of what happened in Montreal and all that kind of thing, people are going to look at this, I think, especially the Mania crowd, and go, not everybody. It's not going to be a John Cena Triple H WrestleMania 23, somewhere around there, main event where they boo John Cena out of the building even though he's the babyface. But I think there could be at least a 50-50 reaction for Cody when people are looking around going, man, this should be Sammy. What the hell is going on? Let's, you know, I don't think that there's going to be unanimous support for Cody. I think it's going to wane week by week leading into WrestleMania. And at WrestleMania, they could be dealing with a very mixed reaction, and I could be being kind here. So any final thoughts on this before we move topics here?
No, I think we've said enough. And again, I feel bad always being so negative on this topic because it's like we said about Elimination Chamber. 95% of the content is really good stuff right now, but it's just unfortunate that the main event stuff is stuff that I really am down on.
I know. All right, let's switch gears to something else. And I don't know if I've gotten your take on this. I don't think I have. Brock Lesnar versus Omos. I know that I've heard rumors, I mean, for months, it's going to be Brock Bray. Apparently that's changed in the last week. It was going to be Brock Austin. It was going to be, at one point I heard Brock Rock. We've heard that for really like 5 years now. We heard about Brock Lesnar in the main event somehow again, or, you know, all these different possibilities. And we get Brock Omos. What, I mean, it's not official, but let's be honest. If he challenged him on TV, of course it's going to be official. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the other one I heard that they teased at the Rumble was Brock Gunther.
Yes.
And I thought that would have been pretty badass. Brock Omos, like, look, when you hear all these conspiracy theories about Vince being back in charge of creative, this is one that it's just like, why? Because Triple H, since he took over, you've barely seen Omos, and if you have, it's been in a very sparing capacity. And now he's going to go one-on-one with one of the biggest stars WWE has ever produced. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't see the benefit. The only thing that I could see behind this is if you have Brock just squash him in kind of like a really cool visual. I've appreciated the Brock Lesnar like cowboy character, babyface, because it proved that he can add another dimension. Certainly not as much as his tracksuit gimmick, but I could appreciate why, and I'm sure he's enjoying himself. But I feel like slowly, this new version of Brock has like hurt the credibility and reputation of him. Like, he doesn't feel like the same Brock. He feels more vulnerable, which I understand. And, like, if he comes in and he loses to Omos, like, just good night the lights. Like, Brock Lesnar's done. And I think that, I understand that every star has his day and you're never going to be as dominant as you once were. But I do think there are certain guys that you have to kind of protect their legacy on some level. I felt the same way as, like, when Roman Reigns pretty much squashed John Cena at SummerSlam 2001, and then a returning Brock Lesnar proceeded to F5 him into oblivion once they went off the air. Like, I feel like that really destroyed the legacy of John Cena, and now every time he comes back, I'm just like, okay, well, this is just a broken down has-been of John Cena. And I feel like, given how you've booked Brock in the Bobby Lashley feud, that even when he's won, it's been by like a fluke, like the roll-up pin kind of while he was in the Hurt Lock in Saudi Arabia. And then in this time around, having to resort to a disqualification, and certainly all the losses he piled up against Roman Reigns. I don't know. It just feels like you're kind of losing a lot of credibility and reputation when it comes to Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, I don't know what they could do in this match. Well, let's just call it for what it is. It's not going to be a 5-star classic. Very power-heavy moves. Brock probably attempting the F5. I mean, that's the payoff. That's really the story, is how's Brock going to F5 Omos? He must be the largest human being he's ever tried to F5, which, I don't know, depending on your definition of large, if the Big Show would top that. Weight-wise, height-wise, I think he's a little bit taller than the Big Show, but that's going to be the selling point, is can he get him up? And that'll be what he's going to try to do in the match, and he'll try 3-4 times before he finally maybe gets an F5. Maybe Omos kicks out, and maybe Omos wins, but then, as you said, after the match, you get Brock Lesnar F5ing Omos to still stand tall, even though Omos got the victory. I think that's probably an early call prediction right now, even though the match isn't official yet. But it reminds me a little bit of, not completely, but when we were talking about the dynamics of this match, of Great Khali and Undertaker in, 07, when Khali came in, and I remember at the pay-per-view, he just outright flat beat Taker. No cheating to win, any of that. He just beat Undertaker. We're all like, what the hell? And subsequent to that, Undertaker beat him several times, but it was kind of like a shock and awe moment, like, what just happened? He beat the Undertaker. It was clean. And he stood tall. Great Khali is like, 8'5" or something insane. I mean, he's probably like 7'4" or whatever. But so it may be one of those things where Omos does come in and dominate Brock. But I think the fans at WrestleMania expect a little bit more from this matchup, even though specifically Omos is much more limited given his size. But the story is going to be probably 6 to 7 minute match. Very power heavy. Omos maybe gets F5'd and stands up, doesn't no-sell it, but, doesn't even get a 1 count from that move or whatever. Like, it's very, exactly what this is going to be. And I just don't know why they couldn't have put Bray Wyatt with him or whatever. I'm not sure. Out of all the options, they had to choose Omos simply because of his size, and that's it.
And then conversely, it seems like it's Bobby Lashley versus Bray Wyatt on a collision course based on Bray Wyatt's promo before the Elimination Chamber. And like, look, I don't really get it. I don't really have an interest in either of these matches. I mean, Bobby Lashley against Bray Wyatt, like, maybe it's just because Bray Wyatt just doesn't have a rhyme or reason for anything right now. Like, why did he all of a sudden say whoever wins between Bobby and Brock, like, you're on my hit list? Like, okay, why? But it does feel like a lot of these matches are just kind of coming together out of Vince-ish ideas. And I guess that's the unfortunate part, is that, like, maybe he's not involved in the day-to-day builds and storylines, because I still do feel like a lot of the build has been good for these matches. And I'm sure that MVP is going to do a masterful job to try and get us interested. But maybe he's behind the scenes saying, like, this is what I want the match to be. How you get there is up to you. And I can't imagine, because, like, again, Omos has been so sparingly used under Triple H, and now all of a sudden he's going to face Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. Like, how is there any... And conversely, from a storyline perspective, why the F would Brock Lesnar even agree? Like... You know, he says, Bobby who? This is a situation where you'd be like, who the bleep are you, Omos? Like, I've never seen you around before. I don't know. Like, it's, I just, like you said, the payoff is going to be, how is he going to F5 this giant, a guy who's taller than anyone he's ever faced? But I don't see the draw to this match in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's the hilarious part. You're right. Like, I mean, the whole Bobby Who thing, which I never liked. I wasn't a fan of that. I thought it was disrespectful to, like, everyone involved. I wasn't a fan of it. But this is a situation in which you could actually use that, and people would go, yeah, he's right. Like, who the hell is he? I mean, instead of going, stop playing that game, it's more of like, no, Brock, you're right. This Brock doesn't have to accept the challenge, but given that it's WWE, we know how pro wrestling works. If you announce a match, or at least a proposed match or a challenge, it's a 100% guarantee that that's going to happen. I mean, that's just the way it works, because they're kind of advertising before they're officially advertising. I understand why the promotion would do this. So it looks like, for all intents and purposes, we're going to get this match unless something changes last second. And yeah, it's unfortunate. And, with the whole Bray Wyatt Bobby thing, you talk about a cold program that really no one seems to give a damn about right now. And I don't think they will in 5 weeks either. I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm totally wrong, and all of a sudden this thing is magic. We've seen something like that happen before, but it feels very kind of like out of nowhere. And the same thing with Cody and Roman that we just talked about. It's like you're starting from scratch when you have a built-in Sammy storyline that was just magnificent for 9 months. You shove that aside and you stick Cody in because, well, that's what we're doing. And then you stick Bray with Bobby. There's no history whatsoever there. When they could have done Bray and Brock, there is a little bit of history there going back to 2016, 2015 Roadblock, I believe was the event, or Fastlane, one of those events before Mania. We've talked about it before. I mean, it's like, so they're starting a lot of just cold programs right now that have no history. I'm with you on that. And, the whole Bray Wyatt thing, though, that's a whole conundrum that we could spend an hour on, of what the hell is going on with him. And I don't want to dive too deep. I know we're a little pinched on time, and there's two more things I want to talk to you about before we wrap up. So I just very quickly, how do you feel about the Bray Wyatt character as a whole, of where the hell it's going with this week on the FireFly Funhouse? It was kind of a meta FireFly Funhouse where he's sitting in a production area watching his own FireFly Funhouse. I've stopped trying to figure it out. I'm just going, if you're not going to make this easy for me, I'm not putting in the effort. I mean, that's how I feel now. I'm getting annoyed with this whole character because it's so scattershot with no direction, but maybe you feel differently. What did you make of this past week?
Honestly, with Bray Wyatt, it's like I've said before, maybe I'm a tad biased, because I always, much like I said that I'm going into Cody Rhodes, anything to do with Cody Rhodes as, let's say, already negative, I go into anything with Bray Wyatt wanting to like it. So maybe I'm starting off subjective right off the bat. And I admit that, because I do feel like Bray Wyatt's the kind of guy that when you're watching it in the moment, it's very captivating, that you get interested. But then it's when it's over that you really think back to, well, what the hell was that about anyway? Where you start saying, like, okay, like, that made no sense. So I always say, and I'll stand by this, is when his segment comes up on SmackDown, whether it's a promo or a FireFly Funhouse or whatever, I get captivated. I want to like it. But then when it's done and there's just no real meaning behind it, or maybe there is and I'm just not smart enough to piece it all together, you kind of just feel a bit defeated because you're just like, man, you really want to like this guy. Everyone wants to like this guy. Everyone was behind this guy. I don't remember any single wrestler that, that the fans have single-handedly rallied behind as much as Bray Wyatt. But he's come back, and it just feels like it's all been a bunch of gobbledygook for nothing, even though I'm a guy that really wants to like Bray Wyatt.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah, he and I'm rooting for him too. It's just I guess I'm a step behind or ahead, depending on how you look at it, where I'm just I'm resigned and kind of disconnected. Don't hate the character, still intrigued, as you said. I am always intrigued watching him. I don't change the channel, so to speak, if people even still change channels anymore because everything's streamed. But I mean, like, so I don't quote unquote change the channel when I see him. I still watch him. He is intriguing. But my mind now, while I'm watching him, if I have to think really hard to figure out what the hell he's saying or stop my, hit pause to see what screenshot is there or whose face popped up. I don't do that. I know some people do that and they spend, hours. I'm done. Like, just, this is getting way too complicated for me in my simple brain. I don't know what it is. I just go, all right, well, I'm in for it. I'm rooting for you, Bray. But you need to stop with this just kind of like 18 directions and just give us one direction. It's just 18 detours. Just go back to the highway. Make this easier for us to understand. At least that's how I feel. I still rooting for him. I still hope he does well, all that. But all right, so a couple more things and then we'll wrap it up here. Dominick and Rey Mysterio got closer this week, which was actually kind of hijacking the face-to-face segment with Charlotte and Rhea. So, which never actually really happened. They went face to face, but there was no promo, which I was a little disappointed. There was no Rhea and Charlotte promo. I'm sure it's coming, but when you advertise a face to face, usually that means, okay, promo. And there was no promo really from Rhea's side at all, which was surprising. It was more about Dominick and Rey, but I didn't hate the segment. I thought it was fine, and it built towards Rey and Dom, which is going to happen at Mania. What did you feel about this segment with Rhea and Dom talking about prison again and getting very intimate in the details with Rhea and Mommy with Charlotte? How did you like this?
Look, I think Dominick Mysterio deserves a lot of credit. I think he deserves a lot of credit for the way that he's really taken a character that was the most punchable babyface, arguably in the history of the company, and is now just like this slimy, true heel that everyone just wants to see get his ass kicked. But I do agree that it was kind of a letdown because you're expecting Rhea and Charlotte. And to be honest, like we were talking about that the tag team titles may main event tonight at WrestleMania. Like I think that anything Rhea was doing should main event the first night of WrestleMania. I think she's that good right now. Aside from maybe Sami Zayn, I think that she's the hottest thing in the company. I think what Rhea Ripley has done over the last 10 months or so has been absolutely spectacular, and she deserves more credit. And look, obviously Charlotte Flair is someone that they see as a legacy star, kind of like the women's division version of John Cena, back when John Cena was, still around, maybe around 2015, 2016. So, I mean, I think it should be getting more traction and more spotlight than it is at the moment. And look, it was a good segment. Obviously, they have a couple more weeks or 5 more weeks left to build this thing. But I just hope that they really kind of put this program at the forefront because it deserves it, primarily because of Rhea Ripley.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I mean, I still wish it was Bianca Rhea, but fine. I've conceded to Rhea and Bianca. I think it's a match they absolutely could main event, and it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case though if the tag titles. And I understand there's also a really good argument for the tag titles, given how awesome that storyline's been with, as we mentioned earlier, with the Usos and Sami and Kevin. So look, yeah, if you were to main event it, I think they could put on a much better match than they did 3 years ago. The storyline is, my God, it's like night and day for Rhea Ripley, who feels like she belongs now, whereas in 3 years ago she didn't know what the hell was doing. She didn't know what if down was up or up was down, whatever. It was a mess. And I remember them turning her heel and then babyface, and then we weren't sure, and then they were back to, like, it was just a disaster with her as women's champion. But now they've brought her to a place. She's gotten herself to a place where she has completely solidified herself. Her and Dominick have this amazing chemistry that I don't think anyone could have predicted. and Dominick getting in the face of Rey after his match and costing him the match and shoving his face and or pie facing him and all that kind of thing. You're waiting for Rey to snap, and he will. I don't know if it's going to happen next week or the week before Mania, whatever it is, but of course it's going to happen, and I'm looking forward to it. I think Dominick and Rey are going to be. I expect it to be a very good match, and actually, I expect the video package for that match to be emotional and really well done because of the history. And I hope they bring back the Eddie Guerrero storyline with, the whole custody battle that they had in the ladder match. And I actually am of the belief if they can somehow swing it, bringing back Vicky Guerrero to speak on this whole thing about how you've disdained the legacy of my late husband and all this stuff. I hope they do somehow find a way to bring Vicky into this storyline. I think it'd be very well positioned if they can. But as far as Rhea Charlotte, I'm all for it. They'll have that promo face to face. They've got enough time, TV time, certainly over the next month and a week to get to there.
Yeah, and I mean, even on the women's side, like, I think that the story's not going to be as good, but I think that's going to be a hell of a collision. Like, what do you think of the build right now, or the ultimate payoff to Bianca versus Asuka?
I think Bianca retains. I don't think Asuka wins. I think Bianca is going to retain, only because Asuka, sure, she's had a facelift, right, so to speak. She's got a new coat of paint. She's got a new. Literally a new face paint. She's got new hair. Okay, she's a little more edgy, but ultimately we already know who and what Asuka is. She's very limited on the microphone, which limits her potential in a big way. She's really good in the ring. She's a cartoon character. Again, respect her to the nth degree, but like, we already know who and what Asuka is on the microphone, which again is a massive limiting factor of her growth. Other than just, okay, she comes out in new face paint. Like, okay, she got a new haircut. That's it. I think Bianca as champion could be a much better option to retain moving forward than Asuka, because if Asuka wins, then you can't have good promos with her as women's champion. I remember they completely ignored her for like 6 months as women's champion. I think it was during the pandemic era, where they literally didn't have her on TV for months at a time. She wasn't injured. They ignored the Raw Women's Champion. It was a disgrace. But I think Bianca winning here and retaining actually would be more of a shock to people and would be a better story. There's more you can do with Bianca. You could turn Bianca heel. I've been advocating for that for a long time too.
She's a megastar already, don't you find? Like, obviously, yeah. Like, I think that they've kind of put her on the back burner a bit because of Rhea and her going the route of the SmackDown Women's Champion, but like, she's kind of like, I would argue that she's already on the level of like Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair.
Oh, she's already there. I think that you could make an argument that if her career ended, God forbid, tomorrow, that she's in the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's how impactful her career has been so far, and she's got a long way to go. She could have one of the greatest women's championship runs or just women's careers of all time. I really believe that. I think I've said this before and I stand by it. She is the best pure athlete, on a pure athletic standpoint. Even I think more athletic than Charlotte Flair. She's stronger, I think, than Charlotte Flair is. And while Charlotte's the more well-rounded overall performer wrestler, I think pure athlete, you got to give it to Bianca. So there's really only up. There's only one way to go for her, and that's up. Sure, a heel run is in her, and that'll be fun too. But, I'm looking forward to Bianca Belair and Asuka. But Rhea and Bianca, I still think they're saving that for like a women's title unification at SummerSlam or something, because they know they have that in their back pocket. I'm surprised they didn't pull the trigger this year. Probably because of the lack of star power on SmackDown for women. But
well, those two, in my opinion, like, maybe I'm being a bit too, like, I guess, ambitious with this comparison, but because of how popular and how hot both of them are in terms of fan recognition and all that and popularity, like, it almost feels like a Rock Austin type of thing on the women parallel. Do you see any parallels between those two?
Yeah, I didn't think of Rock Austin, but if you took the female versions of those two, yes, there is a bit of some similarity there. Now, of course, neither are on the level of the popularity of those two, but in terms of those two that at any time you could put together and have an amazing match and great chemistry, and they have very similar styles, sure, check the box there. Boom, boom, boom. Same thing that Austin and Rock had. It's just that those those two individuals had actual WrestleMania matches where, for whatever reason, they didn't do that with Bianca and Rhea, which is just, again, they must have a plan in place, but I don't know what that is. I would imagine it's Rhea and Bianca at SummerSlam because they're trying to build that as the WrestleMania of the summer. It's in a stadium now. I think that's probably where they're going. But last question, and then we'll wrap it up. Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler this week. Shayna Baszler came out in a singles match, yet they played Ronda Rousey's music, which I thought was ridiculous and really disrespectful to Shayna Baszler. I think it was just, I don't know. I hated that. But it seems as if Ronda Rousey's in a tag team. Now Becky Lynch is in a tag team with Lita. And I'm kind of seeing a moment here at WrestleMania where it's a multi-woman match for the tag team titles for the women. They magically just create tag teams around WrestleMania time to create the illusion of a tag team division. But probably Ronda and Becky have a moment in the ring where they stare off against each other and they talk about, oh, there's history between these two. Just quickly comment on the women's tag team presumed multi-team match for the women's tag titles.
Well, it seems like every year they do this, right? That, a month and a half out from WrestleMania, they start throwing all these tag teams together. But I guess specifically to zero in on Ronda and Shayna Baszler, the only thing that I could think of that would make sense to the tag team or of Shayna using Ronda's theme music is that eventually this is going to lead to a Ronda-Shayna Baszler match. Maybe at SummerSlam, where like you start pulling on the fact that Shayna was overshadowed by Ronda Rousey and, all that kind of stuff, and Shayna Baszler becomes the babyface. So I'm hoping that it is all for a bigger picture reason that ultimately ends in a payoff with Shayna Baszler going up against Ronda Rousey as the babyface.
Yeah, probably. I'm with you on that. Of course, as the picture becomes clearer and more into focus, with who the teams are. Is it a fatal four-way again? Is it just a triple threat tag team match? Whatever it is. But they've got some legitimate stars in this matchup here, and that'll be fun. Again, the dynamic with Becky and Ronda, how they didn't do a one-on-one this year, and how they haven't done it again in 5 years is effing criminal. But hey, I have kind of given up on that. But all right. I think we'll wrap it up here. And again, everyone check out the WrestleMania 2000 Retro Show. We talked a lot about that at the beginning of this episode, giving a bit of a history and callback to our younger years and watching wrestling, and I think you guys will enjoy that episode. But Anthony, I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll be talking in about a week or so. But I didn't mean to cut you off. Is there any final thing you wanted to say or anything you want to plug?
The only thing is, again, as we brought up last week, I know you brought up on the mailbag, for anyone who is, wanting you and I to do more longer length shows. Again, thank you again for the compliments. Very, very humbled by that. And yeah, reach out to me on Twitter as well, AdaMarker25, if you have suggestions, or obviously it's easier to just email Matt. But I hope that we could, have an agreement on how to give the fans more of what they want. If not to sound too cocky, but it is pretty cool that guys want to hear more of us and gals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we'll figure that out. I'm still getting feedback on exactly what people want us to do. So, guys, send it in though. This is the time to do it. If you're interested, mailbag at wwepodcast.com, or you can send a tweet to Anthony or myself and let us know how or what kind of format you'd want, and we'll take it under advisement, as they say. So, all right, buddy. Thanks so much for coming on, and we'll be chatting in a week.
Yeah, man. Have a good week.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.